And this morning I'm going to give my testimony about missions. I've had the opportunity to be able to be involved with missions for about the last 18 years. 10 of those years we were missionaries to Zambia, Africa. Now we teach missions in the college and work with our missionaries, get to take some missions trips to some of the other different countries, been a lot of different places. But God speaks to some people specifically. I mean, we all have a purpose in life, but God chooses some to go to serve Him in another area, on a mission field, to another country. I remember he works on people's hearts and He prepares their hearts. And I remember when I was in college, I told the Lord, I'm surrendered, Lord, do whatever you want me to do. And that really meant, in my mind, I'm willing to be a pastor, I'm willing to be an evangelist, go around preaching in the States or something. But one thing I did not want to do was be a missionary. And the reason I did not want to be a missionary is because I thought maybe God would call me to Africa or something like that, where there'd be diseases and snakes and all that. And it's like, well, I don't want to go there. And the Lord began working in my heart and saying, you say you're surrendered, but you're not surrendered to be a missionary. So, well, yeah. Finally, I surrendered and said, Lord, I don't want to be one, but if you'd help me want to be one, that would be good. So He did. He worked in my heart. A couple weeks later, we had a missionary come. He preached, and I'm sitting on the front row, and I'm in tears. Okay, Lord, I want to be a missionary. And He didn't call me. Okay, well, at least I got that settled. Then Lord led in different ways. I remember as a pastor in Nebraska in 1999, while I was preparing a message from Romans chapter 10, I came across a verse. Of course, we all know, for most of us know Romans 10:13, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. When I get down to the next verse, it says in verse 14, how then shall they call on Him in whom they have not believed? So it's great that people call on His name and get saved, but how are they going to call on Him if they haven't believed? And then how shall they believe in Him of whom they have not heard? They can't believe if they haven't heard. And then what really got me was, and it says, and how shall they hear without a preacher? And I got to start thinking, here I was in the sand hills of Nebraska and knocking on doors and trying to reach. There weren't many people to reach. But the people who were there, a lot of people, they just were not interested. And isn't that the case in a lot of places around the country? And I got to thinking, there's so many preachers here. If someone wants to know, they can find out the truth if they want to. And I got to thinking about places and people who don't have a preacher. And God began to start burdening my heart for missions once again there. And long story short, about 3 years later, my family and I were on the mission field in Zambia, Africa, doing what God had led us to do. And yes, it was exciting. Getting charged by an elephant and having experiences with poisonous snakes. And there were a lot of fun things. There were some challenging times physically with different tropical diseases. But those aren't the things that are most important. The most important is that there are people today that are in heaven right now because we went to the mission field. There were people who had no preacher, and only by the grace of God, He allowed us to go and be those preachers. My wife got to witness to a young boy named Loy. He was in her Sunday school class. He came up to her one day. She was out visitation. He saw her and said, hey, come to my house. Teach me the Bible. And she got to lead him to the Lord. And a couple months later, he got cerebral malaria, went to the clinic with a headache. A couple days later, he was dead. Where would he be had we not gone? I could tell you about countless, not countless, but many stories like that. There was another young man that I had an experience with when we went to visit a house. Me and one of the other church members went to visit a house, and it was a poor area, and there was someone laying on a grain sack, And then they were covered with another grain sack. And I said, oh, well, who's that? And they said, well, it's a patient. They've got TB, they've got AIDS, and they're just resting. They're out in the outside, it's windy, dusty, just laying on the grain sack. I'm thinking, wow. And we got an opportunity. I said, well, has anyone witnessed to him? I said, I don't know. I said, well, we're going to witness to him. He was 14 years old. His name was Coaster. And we got to share Jesus Christ with him, explain that Christ died for him, loved him. Coaster was basically a skeleton wrapped in skin. He was so thin, he was so weak, he couldn't get up and walk. And whatever food he ate, it just didn't give him any strength because the diseases just wreaked havoc on his body. He made a decision for the Lord, but it was, again, a couple months later, he slipped off into eternity. And I got to thinking, how many more Coasters are out there dying without the Lord Jesus Christ? And yet, we've got preachers. We've got a lot of preachers in this room. And there's a lot of people out there who are without a preacher. I challenge maybe some young people, maybe some not so young. Could God be leading some in here to be that preacher that nobody else has? Would you be willing to go and tell them about Christ? Boys, what an opportunity. Got to visit the Raridans in Mexico City. And there were houses that looked like stacked on top of houses, and millions of people. And he was showing, over there is no good church, over there is no good church, and there's just millions. He said, we need more preachers. We need more missionaries. I could say the same thing about Zambia. Over and over, there's so many places. Would you pray and say, Lord, would you want me to go? What a rewarding life. There are people without a preacher. I wouldn't trade those 10 years in Zambia for anything. And if I could be back, anyone knows me, I'd be there. I challenge you.